Seafaring warriors, blonde-haired raiders, a pure people forged in the icy north. This is the Viking we think we know. But in the quiet of clean labs, a different story has emerged from ancient teeth and bone. Scientists sequenced the genomes of 442 people from Viking Age contexts across Scandinavia, the British and Irish Isles, the Baltic and Greenland, and the results replace a single myth with a complex reality grounded in data. Instead of an isolated bloodline bursting outward, Scandinavia itself was a crossroads that absorbed people from the south and the east before and during the Viking Age. And Viking turns out to describe a role and a network more than a single ancestry. Ancient DNA, often called aDNA, changed what could be known because it reads genome-wide ancestry rather than one maternal or paternal line. Researchers target dense parts of the skeleton, such as tooth roots and the petrous bone near the inner ear, authenticate the fragments by age, typical chemical damage, and model ancestry using autosomal data compared against panels of ancient and present-day genomes. That toolkit, paired with archaeology, lets us ask who was moving, where, and how communities formed. One headline is Diversity Inside Scandinavia. The genomes show substantial gene flow into the peninsula and Denmark from the south and the east over centuries. The signals aren't evenly distributed. Ancestry linked to the British and Irish Isles is widespread, while Eastern Baltic-related ancestry is strongest in central Sweden and on trade-rich Gotland. Southern European-linked ancestry is more common in the south. This isn't tea a trickle at the margins. It's baked into the population structure of the period. Another headline dismantles the blonde-only stereotype. Variants associated with dark hair were common among Viking Age individuals, and present-day Scandinavians appear, on average, fairer than people sampled from Viking contexts. In plain language, hair and eye color varied. Viking communities were mosaics, not a single look. Mobility ran both ways. We expect Scandinavians abroad in graves from England to Ukraine, and we find them. But the mirror image also appears. People with non-Scandinavian ancestry living and dying in Scandinavia. Trading hubs like Ribe and island markets across the Baltic read as cosmopolitan in isotopes and artifacts, and the genomes back that up. At the same time, fine-scale ancestry reveals distinct lanes that match historical routes. Norwegians trending west to the North Atlantic, Danes concentrating on England, Swedes moving east into the Baltic, and river systems toward today's Russia and Ukraine. That regional structure suggests separate networks and loyalties rather than a single fused population. Crucially, the genetic results separate identity from ancestry. Two men buried with swords in classic Viking style on Orkney look like locals in their genomes, indistinguishable from people of the Scottish and Pictish world. In Norway, several individuals interred in Viking contexts carry genetic affinities to the indigenous Sami of the north. The takeaway is not that anyone faked being Viking, it's that membership in Viking networks was social and economic and military, a profession, a life way you could join. Archaeology provides the stage on which those lives played out. Monumental ship burials such as Oseberg and Gokstad in Norway show power expressed as spectacle. A community hauls a ship ashore, builds a timber chamber, loads textiles, vehicles, animals, tools, and status goods, then seals everything under tons of earth. That asks religion and politics at once, the ship as a vehicle for the last journey and a permanent landmark that brands authority onto the landscape. Genetics adds who those performers could have been and how far their connections ran. Case studies make the science concrete. The Oseberg mound, dated by tree rings to 834, contained two high-status women and lavish craftwork. Carved sleds, a decorated wagon, tapestries, plus sacrificed animals, a ritual and logistical operation on a staggering scale. The nearby Gokstad ship held a high-status man with working shields and far-traveled goods, a different emphasis within the same grammar of power. Neither burial needs a single ancestry to speak clearly about rank, community labor, and ideology. In eastern Sweden, one grave forced a reset of assumptions about gender and status. The 10th century chamber grave known as Bj 581 at Birka had long been read as the archetype of a warrior burial: sword, axe, spears, armor-piercing arrows, 2 shields, gaming pieces for strategy, and 2 horses. Genomic sexing of the skeleton showed 2 X chromosomes and no Y, confirming the individual was biologically female. Isotope data indicate mobility in her life history. Scholars continue to debate what warrior should mean in this specific context, but the data close the door on the old assumption that such equipment must belong to a man and open a better question. How did women participate in command and conflict across different Viking communities? Methods matter, and they set the limits of what we can claim. Genome-wide autosomal data capture the blended signal of all ancestors and drive mixture models. Y-DNA and mtDNA trace only single paternal or maternal lines and are powerful for microhistory, but can a T, on their own, define a people? Chemical isotopes in tooth enamel add different clues. Strontium ratios reflect geology where a person grew up. Oxygen tracks drinking water and climate. Carbon and nitrogen sketch diet. When lines of evidence converge, say non-local strontium plus ancestry that clusters outside the local baseline, migration is the parsimonious reading. When they don't, the interpretation should stay cautious and marked as uncertain. The ethics are part of the story too. aDNA sampling is destructive. Permissions, consultation, and minimal sampling strategies matter, and secure archaeological context is non-negotiable. Results also evolve as reference datasets grow. New genomes from undersampled regions can refine or shift proportion estimates without overturning the main picture. So what precisely did genetics change? It punctured the myth of a uniform Norse stock and replaced it with a higher resolution map. Scandinavia already diverse, distinct regional networks abroad, identities you could enter by action and affiliation, and looks as varied as any large pre-modern population. It also let archaeologists test ideas that artifacts hinted at, confirming concrete cases of people with insular ancestry in Scandinavian graves and people with Scandinavian ancestry in distant cemeteries, plus family ties that stretch along the very routes the longships took. Put simply, the Viking face is not one face. It could be a brown-haired trader from Denmark, a Pictish-descended islander buried with Norse gear in Orkney, a woman interred in Birka with a commander's kit, or a craftsman whose metalwork links Oslo fjord workshops to far-off markets. The power of the new science is not that it replaces sagas and stones, but that it lets them speak with more nuance. With every newly sequenced individual and every refined isotope baseline, the story sharpens. Connection, migration, and identity made the Norse world, as much as sails and steel did, and the genome is simply the newest line of evidence to prove it. There's one more layer the science opens up: real human networks. In a boat burial in Salme, Estonia, genome sequencing showed 4 young men were biological brothers who died together, kinship literally carried into the grave. Across the North Atlantic at Orkney, men buried with swords in classic Norse style turn out, genetically, to be local insular people. Vikingness, again, reads as a role you could join, not a bloodline you had to inherit. Inside Scandinavia, early market towns such as Rybe look like magnets pulling people in. Strontium and oxygen isotopes captured in tooth enamel, chemical fingerprints of where someone grew up, flag non-locals among the earliest burials. That matches what we see in the genomes and in the artifacts. A cosmopolitan world of traders, craftspeople, warriors, and families knitting the North Sea and the Baltic into one working system. And the separate lanes we picked out earlier aren't just storytelling. Fine-scale ancestry clusters line up with the roots we know from archaeology and texts. Norwegians trending west to the North Atlantic, Danes focusing on England, Swedes pushing east into the Baltic rivers, suggesting distinct spheres of movement and loyalty that sometimes competed and sometimes cooperated. New field methods keep sharpening the picture. Ground-penetrating radar can now find ship graves flattened by 1,000 years of farming, as at Gokstad in Norway, where a ghost ship first appeared as a geophysical outline before excavation. In the lab, conservators are CT scanning whole blocks of soil to record the exact 3D positions of thousands of iron rivets too fragile to lift by hand, letting ship lines be reconstructed without destroying the evidence. Re-examinations of classic finds are changing details we thought were settled. The 64 shields from the Gokstad ship, long dismissed as ceremonial, include boards made to withstand use, objects that once worked at sea before becoming symbols in death. Put together, these strands push us past the old caricature. The Viking world looks like a web of kin and crews and markets, a set of overlapping identities you could step into, and a toolkit of ships, laws, and beliefs that let very different people move together. The genome is not replacing the sagas or the stones. It's giving them names, families, and journeys we can now trace with evidence. Enjoyed this evidence first dive? Like the video and subscribe to Unfolding Legacy for more history decoded.